So at the Virginia Poverty Law Center, I did at first specialize in public benefits and then shifted into healthcare law. And as I always tell young people who are interested in going into law and legal services, one of the most satisfying aspects of legal services work is that as a young attorney, you are immediately responsible for your clients, your cases, and you're not stuck in some back room looking at documents all day. And if client service and working directly with people is what is important to you, then legal aid really does offer great opportunities. So right off the bat, both in Charleston and in Richmond, I was in a position to file and was able to file federal litigation on a variety of issues and argue those cases. And in terms of my litigation work, I had one successful case in the Virginia Supreme Court, and I also argued a case in the U.S. Supreme Court, which, although I had won in the previous two courts, I lost in the U.S. Supreme Court. It was a 4-4 and a concurring opinion made the fifth vote against me. But in any case, that certainly is an experience that lots of attorneys never have. Working on these bigger cases, generally there would be other legal aid attorneys working with me, and that co-counsel experience is also one of the unique and wonderful opportunities that you have as a legal aid attorney to collaborate with others. And being at the Poverty Law Center, which is a support center, part of what's important in our work is knowing what's going on in the field, spotting issues, seeing what problems may be popping up in a lot of the legal aid offices, and then trying to come to some decisions about solutions to those problems. So in my early days, I did do a good bit of litigation. I've shifted away from litigation in recent years to do more legislative and administrative advocacy. So especially in the healthcare arena, there's always a lot going on. Over the years, I've been very active in the Virginia General Assembly to advocate for improvements in our Medicaid program in particular. And it's been really important work and satisfying work. Virginia's been basically a very stingy state in terms of the kind of Medicaid program it's offered. We have, we're ranked 48th in per capita Medicaid spending, which just tells you that our program is very lean and restrictive. So over the years, I've been engaged in doing a lot of work in the General Assembly to both expand eligibility for low-income people, and we've successfully increased eligibility levels for the elderly and disabled, for pregnant women, and for kids. Also improving procedures in the Medicaid program to streamline applications, get rid of restrictive eligibility requirements. For example, when Virginia implemented the new children's health insurance program back in the late 90s, there were restrictions that required people children to satisfy waiting periods before they can get on the program. Families had to comply with certain child support enforcement requirements as a condition of getting health care for their kids. A lot of things like that. We slowly chipped away in the General Assembly to modify those restrictive policies that kept people from getting health insurance. My work in the health field has also led to work in coalitions and in collaboration with a lot of other Virginia organizations. So now I work and help to lead the Healthcare for All Virginians Coalition, which is a coalition of 60 plus Virginia organizations, and we've been promoting expansions of Medicaid coverage so that more people in Virginia can have access to health care. And we were doing this for years, even before the Affordable Care Act was adopted by Congress in 2010. But that federal law has certainly guided a lot of my work recently. It's a huge piece of legislation which really is a game changer for the country, and in particular for states like Virginia, which have had very lean programs. So my work on the Affordable Care Act now is both to see that the new marketplaces are implemented in a way that work for low-income people, make sure that communities get information and training so that people know what's going on. And our top priority has been advocating for the Medicaid expansion in Virginia, which would bring, which under the Affordable Care Act would bring health insurance to 400,000 uninsured low-income people in Virginia. And this has been a battle in the General Assembly and in the in society as a whole. Virginia is one of the states that has refused to adopt the Medicaid expansion. Our governor insisted last year that there wouldn't be any expansion of Medicaid without significant reforms to the Medicaid program. So we're now in a situation where there's a legislative commission evaluating Medicaid reforms, and if they're satisfied that the reforms have been adopted, then they have the power to adopt the Medicaid expansion, which again would be a huge change for low-income people in Virginia. Right now, very poor adults don't qualify for Medicaid at all, and this would bring health insurance to, like I said, 400,000 individuals, and because the expansion is paid for by the federal government 100% for the first 3 years, it really is an opportunity that we're pushing the state to adopt. But the law is controversial, there are lots of politics, and our job is to just carry on and keep pushing. So we'll be doing that again in the 2014 General Assembly session. There's no end to the kind of work that we can do in the healthcare world right now. There's just a lot of things going on that I'm directly engaged in, and that all legal aid advocates need to be aware of to properly assist their clients. And I view it's my responsibility to make sure people understand this new the new law and how it's going to affect people.
And it seems the way that you're approaching your issues of choice and what you're working on are very much impacted by the fact that you are now a lobbyist as well as a practicing attorney. And that seems to reflect the overall structure of legal aid in Virginia, just because the lobbying wing of legal aid and the practicing attorney part have been separated. Have you found that difficult in your own?
It hasn't been difficult to me. I mean, I think it's important for attorneys in the field to also recognize that they also can play an important role to either engage in some of the legislative advocacy or to support the legislative advocacy. For example, I'm always looking for stories about clients who could benefit from legislative changes like the Medicaid expansion. So I rely on the staff in the field to give me those stories. They see people every single day who are struggling because of their lack of health insurance. They're struggling either health-wise or they're struggling financially because of medical debt and medical bills, lack of access to services that they need. So it's still important for the lobbyists to work closely with the folks on the front line in that way. And it's important for people in the field to communicate with their own elected officials. I'm in Richmond, and I know a lot of the legislators from all around the state, but legislators tend to be most responsive to their own constituents. So I often encourage local legal aid staff to communicate with their own elected officials, even if it means calling them after hours, if they're not in a position to do this kind of work during their work hours. So there's a role for all of us in promoting these legislative changes, but obviously when the legislature changes the Medicaid program to expand coverage. For example, it took us many, many years to improve access to insurance for pregnant women. It took the Virginia General Assembly often approves changes on a very incremental basis. So we increased eligibility from 133% of poverty to 150% of poverty, and then up to 160, and then 185, and then to 200. It took many years to get up to the 200% of poverty, which is the eligibility level for the children, for the newborns. So it just made sense to do that. But all along the way, you need to be very persistent to promote those changes, and it often takes a lot of time.
And are there restrictions on attorneys, legal aid attorneys who are not in the VPLC? So their organizations are getting money from different places, which means that
Right.
there are restrictions for them?
Right. Programs that get funding from the Federal Legal Services Corporation at the federal level are restricted in the kinds of lobbying that they are allowed to do. There are certain types of that kind of advocacy that are still permitted, but for the most part they're restricted in what they can do in terms of lobbying.
And that's where you come in?
And that's where I come in. We're not working under those same restrictions.
And so you can communicate, that's part of the training that you all...
Right. And it's important to, we're constantly collaborating with field programs. Everyone at the Poverty Law Center runs a task force of one kind or another, or listservs. So there's a public benefits listserv and a public benefits task force where we all can communicate with one another about what's going on and staying up to date with changes and things like that.
Well, thank you. I might pause there.